you're going to offer it eventually, correct?
Correct.
So, why there on that? Do you know now, Mr. Cross, if you're going to be agreeing to have this submitted or not?
We're fine with that. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. We're fine.
Okay, respondent exhibit. Well, but you did response exhibit 2. This is response exhibit 1 now.
That's fine. Yeah, we're not going to object.
Okay, response exhibit 1 is now admitted. So we've got both response exhibit 2, response exhibit 1 marked and admitted without objection. And we're going back to response exhibit 1. Okay. All right, so response exhibit 1 starts on page 1. So where do you want to go?
Just the next page for right now, please, Judge.
Okay.
So, Ms. Fessaheye, based on what you can see on the screen, and again, if you need to scroll down a little bit, just let the judge know, but do you recognize this document?
Yes.
What do you recognize it to be?
This was the escape policy for the Division of Adult Institutions.
And is this a true and accurate copy of the escape response plan that was in effect on April 16, 2020?
Yes.
And well, let me back up. So incident, can you tell from looking at this document what the original effective date of the policy was?
Yes, the original effective date was November 15th, 1983.
Okay, and there's other dates in there. Do you know what those dates indicate?
Yes, those dates are revision dates. So anytime there was a revision to a policy, that was included to the header. And so the last revision date and its effective date was on 7/1/18.
And there's also a date in the in the portion titled dated. Is that the same thing? Does that also reflect a revision date?
Yes.
Okay, so since the original effective date of this policy, it's been amended multiple times. Is that accurate to say?
That's accurate.
Okay. Judge, if you could scroll down to page 6, please. And then, Judge, I'm actually going to be focused on section 3B as in boy. So if you could scroll down towards the bottom of that page. Well, we'll start right here.
So we're on page response exhibit 1, page 6. And this is part 3, Roman numeral 3. And now you said, I'm sorry, what part did you want to go to?
Yeah, I apologize. I got a little ahead of myself. If you could just go back to, Roman numeral 3. Ms. Fessaheye, you already mentioned that you recognize this document. What does Roman numeral 3 refer to when it comes to escapes?
It's escape verifications and notifications. So this section of the policy listed the steps that you had to take in order to verify that there was an escape, and then also all of the notifications that you had to make in response to it.
Okay, so, and obviously after under 3, the first one, A, there is verification of escape. So that would be the first step in this policy?
That is correct.
Okay, Judge, if you could scroll down just a little bit to 3B. And then once you verify the escape, is that when this section kicks in?
That is correct.
And what is this section?
This section is the notification, or this is the section that discusses what the notifications need to look like after an escape or an attempted escape.
Okay. And specifically it says, well, I'll read it for you. It says, facilities shall make the following contacts immediately after verification of escape or escape attempt, correct?
That is correct.
Emphasis on the word immediately. That's literally contained in that section, correct?
Yes.
Judge, if you could go down to the next page, please. Right there, number 2. What does number 2 refer to? What notification does number 2 refer to?
Monitoring center is the electronic monitoring centers. That's the area that issues, I believe they issued warrants, and they would assist the institution in working with law enforcement.
Okay, so obviously you mentioned that the monitoring center is the unit in DOC that issues warrants if an escape occurs. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
So without notifying the electronic monitoring center, there is no warrant for any individuals that would have escaped. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Judge, if you could go down just a little bit more for me, please. To number 6. Thank you. And what does number 6, what notifications do number 6 pertain to?
6 are notifications to the community, which includes victims, witnesses, and the Office of Victim Services.
Okay, and that again is a required immediate notification after an escape or an escape attempt, correct?
That is correct.
And
Okay, so
in this
now we're
particular
on-
case,
This was on, excuse me, this
Yep.
was on page 7 of response exhibit 1. Okay, go ahead.
with respect to the escape that occurred on April 16th, 2020 at CCI, do you know if the required notifications were made?
They were not.
And when did you learn that the notifications?
Objection. She doesn't, how does she know this?
I'm going to ask her those questions.
Go
When
ahead.
did you learn that the notification to the electronic monitoring center had not been made in a timely fashion?
If I
Yes,
recall,
object because again, she doesn't have the basis to say that it doesn't happen if she doesn't have the knowledge to say it. So he's assuming facts and evidence there.
Okay, I am going to allow her to tell us why she's testifying in this way. And if you don't agree that that's a sufficient basis, then of course you can argue that she could not give this a statement. And you can ask her any more questions you want without
Well,
that.
again, my point is that there's not foundation here for him to put on, to ask a question, stating that, she hadn't told, what a victim service is or anything else, because this witness hasn't identified how she has knowledge of that.
My understanding is that's what the question is now, is for her to explain. So I'm going to allow that. Go ahead.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
yes, please.
When did you learn or how did you learn that the notification to the electronic monitoring center had not been made in a timely fashion pursuant to this policy?
From what I remember, Stephanie Hobie, who was the assistant administrator, notified me that Louis Bixler, who was the electronic monitoring center's director, had learned of the escape on the news and realized that there wasn't any notification to the monitoring center and a warrant hadn't been issued. And that's how I became aware. It was sometime, I want to say it was between 7 a.m. to about 9 p.m. Or sorry, not 9 p.m. Stephanie notified me probably the morning of between 7 to about 9 a.m.
So I'm going to object on the basis of hearsay.
Judge, if I could respond to that?
Go ahead.
I'm not using it to prove the fact that the notices weren't made. I'm using it to prove that that's what Makda believed. She's the one that signed the 15807, so that's what matters here.
Well, except for she's already testified that she can't remember why she did this and why, I mean, I can't tell you how many times it's striking that she now seems to remember stuff when she couldn't remember it before. But when I asked her about this and why she wrote the 15807, she couldn't identify that for us. So
That's an argument for briefing, and we're not going to do that now. And I am going to let it in because this is the state of mind of the person who made decisions. Go ahead.
Ms. Fessaheye, when did or how did you learn, or when and how did you learn that the notification to offices of victim services and programs had not been made in a timely fashion pursuant to this policy?
I
that's
believe
objection, because that's not being put in for the fact that you all have just said that he was putting it in for. That now he's putting in for the fact that the matter stated. That's a clear hearsay. That's not about what the state of her mind was and how she was making that decision.
Can you state the question again, please, Mr.
Yes.
Novak?
When and how did you learn that the notification to Office of Victim Services and Programs had not been made in a timely fashion?
I think to ask Mr. Cross's objection is to ask Ms. Fessaheye, why do you believe that why did you conclude as part of your investigation that this notification had not been made? So that's the question we're looking for. And that's all I'm going to use it for. Go ahead.
If I recall correctly, I was notified, I think her name is Anna Neal, who was in the communications office, that let us know that OBSP had not been notified, or let me know that OBSP had not been notified.
Whose job was it to ensure the notifications to both Electronic Monitoring Center and Office of Victim Services and Programs were timely made?
The warden.
Switching gears here a little bit, you testified that an after-action review was conducted after the escape, correct?
Correct.
And you read that report at some point?
Yes.
Were you also briefed by the individuals conducting the after-action report while it was being compiled?
Yes, I was.
You also testified that Ms. Novak was not immediately, but eventually became the subject of an investigation related to the escape. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And you testified today that you made the decision and that you consulted with with Secretary Carr about that decision. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if I recall your March 31st testimony correctly, you also stated that when you were the DAI administrator, the practice was that the administrator did not have sole authority to place a warden under disciplinary investigation. Do I remember that correctly?
That's correct.
And I just want to be sure I understand what you mean here then. Can you explain those two statements and how they interact with each other?
Yeah, so obviously for a person of that status or in leadership, I couldn't just make a decision on my own without consulting with the appropriate individuals, including the secretary. Just because, again, as I mentioned earlier, typically wardens being under investigation or any person in leadership requires notification, and it could lead to media inquiries. It could lead to political inquiries. There's a lot of impact of placing a warden or someone in leadership under investigation. So you have to, dot your I's and cross your T's before enacting on a decision. And that was what I was doing in notifying the secretary and consulting with him about a decision that I wanted to execute.
So did the secretary have some part in that decision?
I think in that he didn't have an objection for me to move forward.
Okay. And on the day of the escape, Lucas Weber was the CCI deputy warden, correct?
He was.
And Brian Gusky was the security director?
That is correct.
Do you know Weber's gender?
Weber is a man or a male.
Do you know Gusky's gender?
He is also a man.
Judge, can you pull up Respondent's Exhibit number 10 for me, please?
Is that also in the record now, or is that a new document?
I believe it's already in.
I do not have that marked, so I don't think it's it.
Okay, it was only your responsibility, because she said for you to do the checklist. It doesn't say in here that it's your responsibility.
It doesn't.
Okay, Mr. Cross, we can hear you. So if you're trying to talk to your client.
Hey, that's
you wanna
cool.
Mute yourself.
Appreciate that heads up. Thanks.
All right, I've marked response exhibit 10. It's pages 122 to 147. Demotion letters for Lucas Weber and Brian Guskey. And Guskey we have spelled as Gustke. And it's marked. I assume you're going to offer it. Are you going to object at all? Do you believe Mr. Cross? Otherwise, I'll wait to admit it.
No objection.
All right, response exhibit 10 is then admitted. And we will go back to just looking at the exhibit. All right, we are respondents exhibit 10, discipline letters. And we are on page 122. Where do you want to be?
Judge, I'm actually just going to be focused on not this one, but pages 125, I believe, to 129. It's the letters pertaining to Weber and Guskey, which I think are immediately after this letter.
Can I get some relevance here?
Okay. So is this, I don't think we're in the right place. So it's not 125, it's 124 that you want it to be on?
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I'm sorry. So this is the second. Can you scroll up just a little bit? I just want to make sure that I know where I'm at here.
1 second. And then I'll address your comment or objection.
I may have typed it in wrong.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, this is not what I'm looking for. Everything that I need is above this.
Okay, so where are we going?
If you could scroll up, please.
Do you have any idea where?
I believe it's just the 4 pages just above this one. Okay, I think at the next one there too. Right there is fine, Judge.
Okay, so we're on page 124. Okay, of respondents exhibit. Did I say that was which document are we on now?
10, I believe.
1 second, let me write my notes. Okay, Mr. Cross, go ahead. What was your objection?
I didn't see how this was relevant, so I was asking for an offer of proof.
Okay, and Mr. Mullenbach?
Judge, Lucas Weber and Brian Guskey were obviously involved. They were placed under investigation, placed under administrative leave pending the outcome of a disciplinary investigation, just like Ms. Novak was. And in fact, those 2 individuals were terminated from their position, and they're males. So I think it absolutely is relevant. They were engaged in the same misconduct. They were treated the exact same way as Ms. Novak. So I think they are comparators.
Well, they're obviously not comparators, but they're certainly not appointing authorities, and they're not wardens. So that's the big issue with that.
Well, Judge, I think that's something to be argued in the brief, not as whether or not it gets entered as evidence at this point.
I believe that's the correct decision, especially since we've already talked to these people, gone over this issue, even with Mr. Cross asking the questions. So I'm not going to make a decision to exclude any of this. You can argue that it should be considered in your briefs. Go ahead.
So, Ms. Fessaheye, do you recognize, we'll start with this first letter. Do you recognize this letter?
Yes.
Have you seen it before?
Yes. Yeah.
And what do you recognize it to be?
I believe this was the termination letter for Lucas Weber, who was the deputy warden at Columbia Correctional.
And is this a true and accurate copy of the letter that was sent to Mr. Weber?
If the judge could make it so that I could see the entire letter, I can then answer. Yes, it is.
Okay. And Judge, if you could scroll up just a little bit more for me. A little bit more, please. Right there is fine. Ms. Fessaheye, does this letter identify at least a summary of the reasons that Mr. Weber was separated from the DOC?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, if you could scroll down, I think it's 2 more pages. I'm just going to Mr. Gusky's letter at this point. Right there, thank you.
All right, we're on page 127 of Response Exhibit 10, and this appears to be Mr. Gusky. Go ahead.
Same questions, Ms. Fessaheye. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
What do you recognize it to be?
This is the termination letter of Brian Gutsky, who was the security director at Columbia Correctional Institution.
And you've seen this document before?
Yes.
Is it a true and accurate copy of the letter that was sent to Mr. Gusky?
Yes.
And same question as previous, does this letter identify at least a summary of the reasons that Mr. Gusky was separated from the DOC?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, I'd offer these into evidence.
They were already admitted over
Okay,
without
that's fine.
objection.
Judge, if you could now go to Respondent's Exhibit number 20 for me, please.
One second, I want to make sure that was entered. I do not have that as an admitted exhibit, so we're going to have to mark that.
Yeah, I don't believe this one's been entered yet.
All right, I've marked Respondents Exhibit 20, which I assume you're going to offer. It is from page 1029 to 1034. Email to DOC DAI wardens only 122-2020 NIC training for wardens. And I've marked it as yes, you've marked it. I assume you're going to offer it. Do you know, Mr. Cross, whether you're going to be objecting to this document?
Judge, I'm sorry, you're actually on 21. It's the one I'm using is number 20.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Let's see. Oh,
March
much
11th.
shorter title. That's wonderful. I'm glad. Okay. I
We
think
don't
I
have a
just,
copy of that one.
okay, great. Thank you. Let's change it. All right, so now I'm sorry, I have it correctly done. The title is email from Novak, March 11th, 2020. It's been marked. I assume you're gonna offer it, and you said you didn't have an objection, is that correct, Mr. Cross?
Objection.
Okay, and this exhibit, response exhibit 20 is admitted. Okay, let's then move forward. Just save that so I don't forget to save it. All right, and let's get to the document then. So we're on response exhibit 20, and it starts at 10:29 with the title page, and we're going to 10:30. Is that where you want to be?
It's a bit of a string. It's a small one, but actually I'm looking for the email that's just below, the email in the string that's just below that, this one right here. If you could just go up a little bit more. Right there is fine, Judge. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Ms. Fessaheye, you may.
1640?
I'm sorry, it's
What's the
it's
page?
10:30
Okay.
of 1030.
So are we in?
And it's response exhibit 20. It's the email chain for Ms. Novak.
We don't have an email.
Okay, I'm in the non-definitive one. That's why. I'm sorry. Can you say the page number again?
10:30.
Okay. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, go ahead.
Ms. Fessaheye, do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And Judge, if you could just scroll down a little bit just to give her a better sense of, I understand she recognizes it already, but
Who's the chief voting?
I think it's a little bit, it goes maybe 2 or 3 more pages, Judge.
I don't know where I sent this to, right?
We can hear you, Mr. Cross, again.
Thank you, Judge. I think that's the end of it. Ms. Fessaheye, you already said that you recognize the document. What do you recognize it to be?
That was an announcement that I made in March of 2020 about changes to leadership throughout DAI. Specifically, we moved a number of individuals to different institutions, including Sue Novak to Red Granite Institution, Larry Fuchs to Columbia Correctional Institution, Brian Foster as security chief, Randy Hepp to Waupun, and I believe there was a couple of others.
And do you recall what day you sent this email?
March 11, 2020.
Okay. And specifically focused on Ms. Novak, do you recall what prompted her reassignment to Red Granite?
Yes, there were a number of reasons. So just to speak generally and then get more specific. So there was a couple of retirements that were occurring around the time that required us to slot people to cover certain warden positions. And there were issues, well, not issues, I'll back up. There was a sense that our wardens that were serving as wardens for maximum security prisons, such as Waupun and Columbia Correctional Institution, needed a break. Sue Novak herself had come to me on several occasions discussing her role as warden. At some point, she had even asked if she could be relieved, if she could be demoted. So we took a lot of different things into consideration, like I said, including retirement, including workload, different skill sets. For example, we moved Randy Hepp to Waupun because of his skill with personnel, moved Sue Novak to a medium security institution to provide her some relief. Also thought that it was perhaps better suited for her skill set. So there were a number of different changes that had to happen all at the same time for it to work. But that was, those were the considerations that we made specific to Sue Novak.
All right, but Obviously, according to this email, you didn't demote Sue Novak. She was reappointed to the warden of Red Granite, correct?
Oh, that's correct.